We're going to get started in a minute. Good. How's the sound in the back? Good? All right. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Palaia. I'm the town manager. We're here this evening for the public hearing on the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. I'm going to go over the general government budget, and then Dr. Nash is going to go over the Board of Education budget. After that, we're going to take public comment, questions and answers, and then we'll circle back and wrap up the presentation and discuss next steps. So I'm going to start very high level, and then I'm going to go into the municipal, talk about the revenues, and then go into the municipal side. So the combined budget increases between the municipal budget and the Board of Education budget will increase both budgets by $4.5 million. That's a 6.4% increase overall. There is a state-mandated municipal spending cap, and it gets a little detailed, but it breaks down into discretionary increases and non-discretionary increases. So when you take out the non-discretionary increases, that brings the overall increase to 4.37%, and the municipal spending cap that's mandated by statute for this year is set at 2.64%. So following the hearing, after we take in your comment this evening and questions, the town council will need to deliberate on budget reductions or other adjustments and changes to bring the overall spending to the 2.64% level for town meeting on May 4th. Going into the revenues, our current year tax collection is $43.8 million, and our budget is supported by non-tax revenues of approximately $27.4 million. Before we looked at any tax increases that are necessary to support next year's budget, we wanted to account for new tax revenue created by economic development and other development efforts throughout the year. So we had approximately $700,000 of new revenue, but we also had some new exemptions, primarily in the category of veterans exemptions that were mandated by state law. So when you subtract out those exemptions, we have new growth of about $484,000, and that holds down the overall need for a tax increase. Some other revenue factors that contribute to the budget. When we get into the municipal side, we'll talk about the paving management plan and the needed spending level there. And one of the things that occurred last year was we shifted, in the current year budget I should say, is we shifted approximately $420,000 of our pavement management costs to fund balance. So we're essentially using our savings account to pay for costs that are going to reoccur every year, which is not ideal. So one of the assumptions we made going into next year's budget was that we would reverse that trend and build that expense back into the tax rate because it is a continuing cost. We are seeing a lot of development activities, so we made an assumption that we're going to see almost $200,000 in new permits and fees from new development. And on the state aid front, things look pretty level. There's some minor changes, but really nothing to make a note about. And you can see what I just presented again in table format there. The new growth, subtracting out the allowance for the exemptions, tax levy this year, tax levy next year, what we're looking at for proposed revenue to support those budgets. Excellent, thanks. Going to the municipal side, focusing on that for a second, the current year's budget's $23.6 million. Proposed increase takes it to $24.5 million. Approximately $11 million of that comes from non-tax revenues, various state aids, permits and fees, user charges. The rest comes from property tax funding. And you can see the overall mill rate, approximately 30% of the full mill rate is needed to support the municipal budget level. both in the current year and going into next year. You can see a small increase of 0.6% in the proportionality. Next slide. So overall, municipal spending, $24.5 million. Built into that, there were approximately $235,000 of requests that were not included in the proposed budget that went to the town council. It's an overall increase of approximately $900,000. The significant expense factors that got us to that point onto the municipal side, the pavement management program is the most significant one. In the current year, we cut approximately $825,000 in spending. We had to go find that someplace else to maintain our pavement management program. And just for a little context, our pavement management program called for spending of approximately $2.5 million over 5 years to bring our roads up to a C or a low C+ level. And we're not there yet. Our road condition overall is probably a C-, D+, C-. So we'd like to continue to build that overall road condition up a little bit higher and get to that C, low C+ level. And to do that, we need to sustain the funding of approximately $2.5 million for a couple more years, and then we can start to taper that down. Another significant expense factor for the municipal side is the new community center that's planned to open in a couple months. We need to add janitorial service, valued at about $16,000. That's an additional part-time person, or taking a part-time person and making them full-time, an additional maintenance position, and fringe benefits related to that, approximately 0.064 mils in the overall increase. Another significant expense factor, $107,000 for contractual salary increases. These are our bargaining units on the general government side. 0.06 mils impact. In the previous fiscal year, the town council authorized the 9th police officer position. We had some savings that were related to our constabulary reserve that we used to get that position started, so it was not in the current budget. And now that the position has run for a while and we want to keep it filled, we need to build that expense into the budget. So we're building most of the cost in. We built in 10 months of salary, the fringe benefits. We'll build the other 2 months in the next fiscal year if this gets funded this year. But we just needed to moderate their overall expense to keep the mill rate down. So that's why there's 10 months of salary instead of 12. As you can see, 0.05 mils. Another significant increase, salt and calcium, $75,000. If you look at our salt and calcium budget and highway maintenance, it's been underfunded habitually. So we're continually having to go to our highway reserve and hit that savings account to fund our winter operations. When you look at the cost increase per ton for treated and untreated salt, we have an increase there. We also have an increase, or not an increase, but a steady usage that we're not funding. So adding that $75,000 in counts for the increase in material costs, and it brings us more in line with what we actually use in the winter. Will keep us from having to hit that emergency storm maintenance account. In the current fiscal year, we had also created an additional full-time Parks and Grounds position. It was funded from a special tax that the state imposes on NIPS. Some of that money gets sent to the town, and we were able to use it in the current year's budget to offset the tax increase for the year that we're in. We'd like to continue with that service, particularly in light of the fact that we're adding the community center. The town's going to be responsible for maintaining those fields. And so we're proposing to build that into the budget. The Council of Governments currently provides our animal control service. We have a contract for them to do that. They've had some challenges in providing that service and some unexpected costs that they can't control. And those costs are being passed on to the member towns that use that service. So that cost increase for us going into next year would be approximately $25,000. Health insurance, and this is just the calculation for the general government side of the house, 5.6% increase in premiums, modeling that on our current enrollment, a $20,000 increase, 0.01 mils. Human service budget, this is a mix of social service agencies, contracted costs like 911, our ambulance service, a variety of others. There's several in there. There were some new requests, additional $30,000 requested from Quinebaug Valley Senior Center, an additional request from the Corner Peer Support Group, $25,000, $10,000 for the Child and Family Agency, and a per capita increase of 40 cents from our health district, which provides health services to the towns in the Northeast region. That comes out at $11,000. On the capital side, we've budgeted $125,000 for soffit and building fascia repair at the Bugabee Building. This is the building that houses our historical society next to Town Hall. The $125,000 is being repurposed from previously appropriated capital projects, so it doesn't have necessarily have a tax increase impact. We're taking funds that were appropriated for capital and we're reusing them. The Main Street camera project, $35,000, similar funding source. This proposal would install 6 surveillance cameras along Main Street in the area of Davis Park. This has been a requested from our business community in light of the atmosphere on Main Street. And our police chief can get into more details on how that would work if there's questions about it. But we're looking to kick that program off in this year's budget through our capital appropriation. There's a Dyer Street project. I think if you got the handout outside, there's a map showing this. This is a full road restoration of this street. We're applying for approximately $2 million in grant funds to redo that street, make some ADA sidewalk improvements, improve the connections, and then ultimately repave the roadway. If we get this grant, the town would have to match approximately $200,000, and that would come out of our appropriation for the pavement management funds. And you can see here, just modeling the tax impact, depending on what your assessment is. The typical assessment for a residential property in Killingly is a little below $148,000. So you can see the tax impact relative to how much your property assessment is, starting at $252 a year and going all the way up to $756 a year. And if you want to find out exactly what your property tax impact would be, you can follow that link. It'll take you to our property tax calculator, and you can figure it out, what your particular property tax increase is. Also mentioned on a related note, there's not a slide on it, but we have our sewer system. It's not funded by property taxes, it's funded by user charges. There's a 7% increase proposed in the sewer use rate, largely due to an increase of $400,000 in capital expenses to replace aging equipment and make some improvements in various categories. If you look at the typical single-family residential bill, that 7% increase would equate to approximately $40 throughout the year on your bill. Is that it? Okay. So I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Nash to give her presentation. And when she's done, I'll come back up and moderate some of the comments and questions.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Sue Nash, Superintendent of Killingly Public Schools. I'm here to talk about the Board of Education's budget. So here's a timeline of the Board of Education's budget development. After many months of development, I present the Board of Education's approved and adopted budget tonight. This timeline provides important context for where we are today in terms of both events and financials. To fully understand this budget, we need to go back to last June. At the end of last year's budget cycle, the Board of Education received a budget that was 1.24 higher than the previous year. Another way to view this is that the approved budget was 1.8 million less than what the Board of Education had requested. As a result, we began the year with 14 fewer positions, 8 reduced positions, and $446,000 less in other budget lines. When I presented to the budget in December to the board, we did not yet have finalized health insurance information, but we used a placeholder at that time with a clear disclaimer that we anticipated an increase. That budget also already included staff reductions due to enrollment shifts, particularly in the elementary grades. Following budget workshops in January and February, the Board of Education voted to add $424,000 in decision packages back into the budget. On February 19th, we received updated health insurance information. In the following weeks, our business office and insurance consultant worked to complete the necessary calculations and apply them across the various plans outlined in our contract. On March 5th, the board convened for a special meeting where members were informed that after incorporating the updated health insurance costs, the budget reflected a 7.61% increase. The Board of Education adopted that budget on March 11th. For the past several years, we have used a zero-based budgeting approach. In true zero-based budget model, there is no predetermined cap. You build the budget from the ground up based on actual needs, and every expense must be justified. There are no assumptions carried over from prior years. For example, if $10,000 was spent in a particular line this year, we do not assume that the same amount will be needed the next year. In some cases, the need may be greater, and in others, it may be less. During budget development, I often requested historical data on specific line items so that we can use information to make logical and responsible decisions. This year, however, we incorporated a modified approach that included a hard cap. For each line, the cap was set at the amount spent in 24-25. We also closely examined any line that was not fully expended in the prior year to better understand why. In some cases, this led us to reconsider how much funding was truly needed. To be clear, discretionary lines were effectively capped at zero growth. This does not include fixed costs such as salaries, benefits, or contractual obligations like utilities. As a result of these constraints, several decision packages were developed this year, and because of principals and directors were not able to fully accommodate certain needs within their capped budgets. This slide captures the central theme of this year's budget: drivers versus goals. The majority of our budget increase is being driven by mandated or structural costs, rather than by investments directly aligned to our strategic priorities. That is the core tension we are facing. However, even within these constraints, we remain committed to continue to move our goals forward. We have approached this strategically and without increasing the overall budget. First, we reallocated a retirement position to bring a pyramid model coach to KMS. Quickly explained, the pyramid model is a behavioral model that we have seen work really well at Goodyear and at KCS, decreasing behavioral referrals. Second, we must ensure that students with special needs continue to achieve academically. With an increase in the number of students requiring specialized services, we need to expand our capacity. We are doing this through a partnership with Central Connecticut State University, where we cover half of a tuition for an individual who has a bachelor's degree to earn a master's degree in special education in 1 year while working in our school district as a paraeducator. In return, they commit to teaching in our district for 3 years. We currently have 2 individuals who will begin this program next year. In addition, we have reallocated funds within our operating budget to support additional special education position. These are all budget-neutral strategies that respond to student needs while maintaining fiscal responsibility and continuing our progress. The Board of Education budget is significant. I won't stand here and suggest otherwise. None of us are comfortable with the number shown on this slide. The adopted Board of Education budget is $51 million, which represents an increase of $3.6 million over last year, or 7.61 increase overall. In the bottom right corner of the slide, you will see several key budget drivers, which I will walk through next. Any line shown in parentheses represents an area where we are spending less than we did last year. Out of our 8 primary object lines, 4 are lower than last year's spending. The 100 and 200 lines are self-explanatory, benefits and salaries. The 300 line are services performed by individuals that are not employed by Killingly Public Schools, such as legal fees, audits, audit fees, officials for sports, and other educational consultants. The 400 line is utilities and contracted services, such as our technology leases, copiers, elevators, sprinklers, fire alarm systems, and so on. In the 500 line, there are our armed security officers, our school resource officer, $50,000 for adult education, but the lion's share of that line is out-of-district placement tuition and magnet school tuition. The 600 line are instructional supplies, 700 equipment, 800 dues and fees for professional organizations, sporting events, entrance fees for student competitions, even things like boiler inspection fees, as well as items for graduation or family engagement. However, the 2 areas that stand out significantly are the 200 line, which represents benefits, and the 500 line, which is largely driven by special education tuition. Again, the 2 largest drivers in this year's budget fall within the 200 line and the 500 line. And if those 2 lines, the 500 and the 200 line, had remained flat this year, the combined increase for all other budget lines would have been 1.2%, or $568,000. However, that is not the reality this year. Both special education and employment benefits are mandated costs. So, why is health insurance so high? Well, there are a few key factors. First, the rising cost of medical care and prescription drugs continue to drive premiums upward. In addition, our local claims have been higher than in previous years. Together, these factors contribute to the overall increase in our health insurance rates. Special education costs are also rising, largely due to an increase in the number of students requiring services, as illustrated in these charts. Over the past 5 years, Killingly has seen an increase of more than 100 students in need of specialized services. This trend closely mirrors what we are seeing across the state. In addition, there have been growth in the need for more intensive and specialized services, particularly out-of-district placements. There are no guardrails on what these placements can charge for tuition. For example, last year, one provider raised tuition 15% mid-year. As a result, the cost of these placements has increased, along with the cost of transportation associated with them. Over the years, we have made a concerted effort to reduce our out-of-district placements. Each of our schools have both an academic intensive learning program and a social emotional learning program in their buildings. These in-district environments provide students with the support they need to be successful, often preventing the need for out-of-district placement. Excess cost reimbursement. This has been the topic in a lot of news lately. There has been much testimony submitted at the state in hopes that the reimbursement rate is going up this year. But what exactly is excess cost reimbursement? The excess cost grant was originally intended to reimburse districts 100% of special education costs that exceed 4.5 times a district's per pupil expenditure. However, in practice, that has never been fully realized because the state has never appropriated enough funding to meet that obligation. In Killingly, we typically receive between 70 and 75% reimbursement for students who meet that threshold. That is significantly below the 100% reimbursement level that was originally intended when the grant was established. But what if this year, with all that testimony, the grant was fully funded? If we take the amount eligible for reimbursement this year, approximately $1.9 million as of March, and use that full funding formula, we would receive about $571,000 more than we are actually anticipating. Revenue. All of our projected revenue streams are shown on this slide. The largest source of revenue is the Education Cost Sharing Grant, which totals approximately $15 million. We also anticipate an increase in funding from the Agricultural Science Grant. However, it is important to note that these figures are all projections. Overall, we are projecting approximately $860,000 more in revenue than last year. And this is important because the more revenue the Board of Education brings in, the more we offset what the impact is on our total budget in terms of tax dollars needing to be raised. Here is the breakdown. If our budget was $51 million, 36% of that would be offset by our revenue, leaving $32 million as the part that would be supported by local tax dollars. So we are trying to do our part. Over the last 2 years, we have taken several strategic steps to strengthen our position and offset costs. First, we have secured partnerships with the Woodstock and Sterling Boards of Education, allowing their students to attend Killingly High School. Through focused marketing and recruitment efforts, we have also expanded enrollment in our Ag Science program. Our incoming 9th grade class is now at full capacity with 60 students and a wait list. In addition, we have increased the number of students from sending towns from an anticipated 61 students in 25-26 to an actual 77 this year, and now projecting 87 students for the 26-27 school year. All of this translates into additional revenue to help offset our budget and reduce the burden on taxpayers. How much? Approximately $503,000. And what else have we done? We've launched our own in-district special education program, the Killingly Therapeutic Academy, reducing reliance on out-of-district placements. Through this program, we were able to bring back 8 students who had previously been placed out of district, 6 additional students who would have required out-of-district placement. We also enrolled 4 students who moved into Killingly already placed out of district because we are required to honor those placements. We were able to transition them into the academy. Finally, we currently have 3 tuition students from other districts. Their enrollment helps offset costs covering the salaries of 2 special education teachers and 2 paraeducators, as well as supporting our expulsion program. That helps keep the overall cost of the therapeutic academy down. And lastly, we have established our own adult education program. This is a state-mandated service that previously cost Killingly over $200,000 each year through ESCON. By reallocating staff and taking on additional responsibilities, we built our own program from the ground up, saving approximately $150,000. And just this week, the Thompson Board of Education voted to send their adult learners to Killingly generating an additional $50,000 in revenue. We are intentionally making these moves to control costs and lessen the burden on taxpayers by increasing revenue wherever possible. Non-lapsing. I'm just going to grab my water. That's much better. Thank you. All right, so now on to non-lapsing. This is an account where the Board of Education can deposit money should they have any remaining funds from the previous fiscal year. This slide reflects the current status of our non-lapsing account. At this time, our uncommitted balance is approximately $813,000. This is after committing just over $1 million to Phase 1 of the Access Road project. The contribution from 24-25 is still pending the audit, but we estimate it will be approximately $800,000. When combined with the current balance, this would bring our total available non-lapsing fund to approximately $1.6 million. We are facing two major potential uses for these funds. The first is addressing the current year deficit, which is largely driven by special education tuition. As of April, that deficit is approximately $650,000. The second is Phase 2 of the Access Road project, which is an estimated $967,000. And you may wonder, what is this Access Road project? I just want to clearly outline this Access Road. I know it's of great interest to many. I also want to be absolutely clear that the Access Road is not part of our operating budget. So just to be clear, no part of the Access Road project is in our operating budget. So just some quick history. In 2021, prior to my appointment, there was a fire in the wooded area beyond the lower athletic fields at the high school. Emergency vehicles had difficulty accessing the road due to the narrow and curved road leading down to the concession stand. As a result, the fire marshal directed the previous superintendent to build an alternate access road. When I began in August of 23, planning and design work for the new access road was already underway. This work had been discussed with the facilities subcommittee throughout the 23-24 school year, as well as the full Board of Education. On June 14th, 2024, the fire marshal issued a cease and desist on the use of our school athletic fields here at the high school. The following day, I met with him, and he agreed to allow continued use of the fields, provided that we had a plan in place to construct an access road. Given that design work was already in progress, we continued moving forward. After several design iterations, we met with the town in November 2024, as this type of project is considered a capital project and had been our capital improvement plan for several years. At that time, the town did not take on the project. As a result, the Facilities Committee of the Board and the Board of Education as a whole recommended moving forward using our non-lapsing funds. Since then, we have completed multiple design revisions, held numerous meetings, secured wetland approval, and received approval for the use of non-lapsing funds. The project is now ready to move forward. The total cost of the road will be just under $2 million and will be completed over 2 years. The road will be constructed along the far side of the football field, accessed from the parking lot to the left of the field, and will exit near the baseball field. It will be paved to prevent erosion. While sidewalks and lighting are not included at this time, the design allows for those features in the future. To wrap up, this slide provides a 10-year look back on the gap between the Board of Education's requested budget and the final adopted budget. Over that time, there have been years when the board's request was larger and times when they were more modest. Similarly, the amounts approved through the referendum process has also fluctuated. However, one constant pattern stands out. Over the past 10 years, 6 of those years shows a significant gap between what was requested and what was ultimately approved. The largest gap occurred last year, immediately following another notably large gap the year prior. If you scan the chart, you will see we have not experienced 2 consecutive years with gaps of this magnitude in the past decade. That is an important point to keep in mind, particularly as we consider the impact on our budget moving forward. Just for context, if we reduced our current budget to 5%, that is a reduction of $1.2 million. And if we want to put people to that, that's 21 classroom teachers, 30 full-time paraeducators, or 8 school administrators. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Nash. We're going to move now to the public comment question portion of the hearing. In case you don't realize, I just want to let everybody know that the meeting is being recorded and streamed. So if you do come up and make a comment at the microphones, you're going to be streamed and you're going to be recorded. So there's not that many people here. I'd like to start with allowing each person 5 minutes to speak. And if we get through everybody that wants to speak and somebody else has something more they want to say, you can come back up after everybody else has had a turn. And then following that, I'll turn to the Town Council and the Board of Education to see if they have any comments they want to make before we wrap up the meeting. So if you're interested in making a comment for or against, or if you have a question you'd like to try and get answered, you can make your way up to the microphones and state your name and address, and we'll take it from there.
Adam Reynolds, 5 Fantasy Road. The only thing I want to really point out is it looks like we're trying to build surpluses in some areas, especially like the road paving. I get that, but I just want to understand that, we just came off an appraisal. We just had everything reassessed, so we already just had a large tax increase just from that alone. I want to be very mindful about that going into, potentially raising again. And as far as the median standard saying that, starting at 250,000, showing, these small increments, let's get realistic. I mean, how you can watch real estate. There's not many houses out there for 250,000. They're much higher than that. So you see most of that's going to be on the bigger side of the scale. So I feel like we should find a way to really reel in that coming off of a year before of an assessment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ida Barris, 1123 North Road. Thank you for all your hard work. I know that it was probably hours of great frustration. I think it's really important that we look at those last education budgets where, well, if you look at the number of people that have to be eliminated in order to lower that budget, I think we really need to just go ahead and support the budgets as they are, because everything is really, I know it's tight. I don't want to pay more taxes, but I also don't want to live in a town that doesn't have good programs and good support and a quality of life that makes people want to move to Killingly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shel Murphy, 325 Breakneck Hill Road. Thank you, everybody, for your work. I always appreciate Dr. Nash looking for revenue. She does a good job with that. You guys have to cut. People cannot live like this year after year after year with their taxes going up. 2 years ago, my taxes went up $70 a month, or my mortgage did or whatever, and last year, $300 a month. Who's going to be able to live here? Your whole tax base is going to leave. Anyways, you do a good job, but you got to cut.
Claudette Rogers, 294 Putnam Pike, and I just wanted to speak on the education budget and that the number of 100 special needs kids. I don't think people who are not in the school system understand that, like back in even my day, so 30 years ago during school times, there was maybe 10 or 25 special needs kids that needed education. We have a lot of one-on-ones. We have a lot of even kids that aren't diagnosed with special needs. I just think it speaks to the pandemic that we are living in, of not getting to the source of why we have so many special needs kids. And I don't think us as a society, it's not just Killingly, Connecticut, it's not just Connecticut, it's not just New England, it's nationwide here, that we are dealing with special needs kids. And our health care, you know, we support the Cancer Society with hot dogs and red dye 40s, you know, like we can't live the way we live, but we do. We live the way we live, and us as a community, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. We can't keep making bad decisions, like putting the high school where it is right now, with no sidewalks and no emergency access to our fields. And now, you know, however many years later, we're dealing with that we have to put in a public access road. When we put this high school here, the local residents, me being one of them, on Putnam Pike, had to pay for city sewer, city sewer. I had to pay for a hookup, $5,000. They enhanced my property value by $5,000 by putting this high school here. That I don't know anybody in the community that thought this was a good idea. The amount of transportation that had to be done by busing the kids back and forth to here, to the old high school for the first couple of years because our fields weren't ready. The time I came up here for one of the football big events, and I couldn't get my bus up the road because they had cars parked on both sides of the road, so no emergency personnel could get up, even up the road. We fixed that through the years, but I think as a town, I just hope we do better. You know, we hope we do better for our seniors that can't afford to live here, and for our kids, because I don't know, with the state guidelines and what we have in front of us, like how we can legally, properly educate these kids to standards that are needed, you know, like the 100 kids that have special needs, and there's no way around it. She can't cut no more. But I just think we need to stop making bad decisions. And I'm hoping as a town, we got this Water Pollution Control Authority. I hope we talk more about that, you know, that we are making decisions now to our already polluted waters in Killingly, Connecticut. We're going to put a distribution center on our aquifer right there. right next to our school, where we have no sidewalks, where our kids walk on these roads. Our kids, they go down Soap Street. They go down these roads right here. And I just am so upset that everything everywhere is such a mess, and I don't know how what line do we cut out of here, you know? What line do we say that they can't have and you guys can't have to make this town work better? To make these senior citizens be able to afford to live here, to make our kids be able to have a good education. I don't know where we powwow, but I think that somewhere in here, we need to do better for everybody, and yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bob Trahan, 11 Keys Road. I just want to say, I'm 64 years old. I just spent 10 years saving and 3.5 years every weekend, because I work full-time, building my own house. And I've grew up in Brooklyn. I've lived in Danielson my whole life. And now I'm going to have to leave because I can't afford the taxes on my new house. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara LaLiberty, 31 Carroll Avenue. Regarding the Killingly Therapeutic Academy, it appears that your line item, the 500 line item is the largest increase, $1.96 million. Yet the revenue is $250,000. What can be done to get more of our special education students back into Killingly so that we can lower that $1.9 million?
Great question. So right now, the staff that we have for the Killingly Therapeutic Academy is enough to support about 20 to 25 students, but we do have the capacity to expand that. Of course, that requires more staff. If we can have more tuition students coming in, we have students from Putnam and Brooklyn and Plainfield, we can increase our revenue and offset some of that staff. But it's kind of that fine line when you're starting a new program or starting a new business, right? You are starting small to see if it's successful, and then if you can generate enough revenue, you can expand. So we have, pretty much the entirety of the old high school second floor. If we can generate enough revenue in the next couple of years, it doesn't happen in 1 year, but in the next couple of years, we can indeed hire more staff and then increase the number of slots that we have available. We are maxed out right now. So we are at capacity at the Killingly Therapeutic Academy. But if we have more staff over the next couple of years with increased revenue, we can indeed expand and bring more of our students back.
And this program that you talked about, having someone come in to, not quite sure what the wording was, where they would work with the special education and get a degree and then work for us for 3 years.
Yes, that's our partnership with Central Connecticut State University.
Okay.
We had enough funding for 2 individuals for next year. We would pay for half of their tuition, which about $11,000 each. So in total, $22,000. We have a tuition line already. That's not an add to the budget. We already have tuition in our budget for teachers and paraeducators that do go back to school as part of their contract. So we would use that money, and those individuals would work as full-time paraeducators, contributing to our buildings and our special education population. And within 1 year, they would be certified as special education teachers, where they would be committed to us for 3 years.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
And I agree with the others who have spoken since the revaluation last year. My taxes went up 40%, 40. So to add another 12% on top of that, it's really going to hurt.
Thank you.
Hello. Lydia Rivera Abrams, 45 Mason Hill Road. Good evening. I'm going to thank you for putting yourself in the position that you're in. It's not easy. But you put yourself there. So now you have to answer the questions. When you go into surgery, the doctor or somebody, the nurse, surgeon, comes in and explains the surgery to you before you sign the page that relieves the hospital from any liability. I would ask that you respect us enough to explain the surgery. My life has been dedicated to education, so I'm not going to try to justify my objections to some of these things. But you've got to respect those of us who are putting in the money to sustain the standard of living. And yes, our standard of living is spoiled. Just plain spoiled. Whenever you have to make a decision about what to buy or what to do, think about the people in Ukraine or Gaza and what they have to deal with and how spoiled, rotten we are. To the superintendent, I love you both, assistant and the one. What are the categories of special education that you fit students into? How is the need for special education assessed? Who determines the need for special education? Who determines the cutoff between a program in the Killingly Public Schools or private placement? What is the difference, cost-wise, between a private placement and a home tutor? I believe I've heard over the years that most of our special education programs address behavioral issues. What are the degrees that separate a classroom from a private placement? Who decides to vote in favor of an access road or an educational need? And ultimately, defines this mythical level of success? How do we put a finger on what is achievable success according to an individual ed plan for a special education student? Nothing is easy when you're dealing with the lives of over 15,000 or 20,000 residents of Killingly. But you have put yourself in a position where you have to weigh and balance the standard of living for all the residents of Killingly and the degree of achievable success for a student receiving special education.
Thank you. Dr. Nash, did you want to
Sure.
address any of those?
I will try to address some of those in order. A lot of them, Ms. Rivera-Abrams, thank you for your question, focused around what we call the PPT, or Planning and Placement Team. So if you, let's say there's a student, the student's in second grade, and when you talk about success, there are state standards for every different subject area, where students should be meeting those standards by the end of a particular year. And let's say in second grade, that student is not meeting all of those standards. Maybe it's just in one area, maybe it's in several areas. And then, we would apply intervention. And that's not special education, that's just some intervention. Maybe it's reading help, math help, try to get that student back to the state standards for that particular grade. We collect data all the time on this. So if a student enters intervention, we're collecting data on how close they are getting to those standards over a period of time. What do we use? We use assessments, a variety of assessments. We have many different assessments for many different needs. And then, let's say 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, we are not seeing the response to intervention that we are hoping for. We may increase that intervention. That still does not mean that student requires special education services. It's just more intensive intervention. Again, we collect the same round of data, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, but we don't let it go too long. If that student is not responding to intervention, there might be something in the way that they learn that requires specialized education. And so we come to what we call the Planning and Placement Team, PPT meeting. Around the table are general education teachers, special education teachers, interventionists, most importantly, the family, because they are part of the team. And we discuss what we have seen through the intervention process. At that time, it is a team decision of all those people around the table, whether or not we want to move forward to special education evaluations. If indeed the team agrees that there is enough evidence, enough data, that that student should be evaluated, that student is evaluated. That student could be evaluated by our school psychologist. Also, our special education teachers are trained in certain evaluations. They come back to PPT, to the team meeting. All of those individuals come back again, and we review what the evaluations found. And it could be that there is maybe a learning disability. It could be that there is a speech and language impairment. Those are some of the classifications you had mentioned. I believe there are 13 altogether. Autism, traumatic brain injury, deaf or blindness, hearing impairment, visual impairment, orthopedic impairment, multiple disabilities, emotional disturbance, intellectual disability, other health impairments, developmental delay, autism, all of those. And so whatever evaluations we have done, we look at them collectively, and as a team, it is determined or not that that student classifies for special education services under a classification of fill in the blank, whatever the evaluation yielded. And then that student receives specialized education from a certified special education teacher around goals that are developed for that child. Every special education student has an individualized education plan, often called an IEP, with specific goals for them to reach, I'll use the word success, but it's really grade level standards. So we're trying to level the playing field through specialized instruction, accommodations, modifications for this student, so that they can access and have access a grade level curriculum and be able to meet those grade level standards. I may have forgotten one of your questions, but did I get them? Yes. Oh, so kind of what makes an outplacement different than what we have? So in school, there's a federal law with special education. It's called the least restrictive environment. The least restrictive environment for all students is the general education class, right? Just general education class. If that student is not successful, a special education student is not successful in their general education class, maybe there's paraeducator support in that class for that student. If they're not successful there, and I use the word success, and the success is measured by the goals in the IEP. If they're not successful in that environment, they might go to a pull-out situation where it's a resource room, a smaller class with a special education teacher to receive services. If they're not meeting their goals there, like I mentioned before, we do have programs inside of our school that are very specialized. If they're not meeting success there, that would be the PPT, the planning and placement team, come together. Again, after that cycle of data happens over and over and over again, and the team decides if we, as Killingly Public Schools, can support that student here, or we need to seek an outplacement. And that would be the difference there, mostly, well, depending on the outplacement, right, could be a therapeutic component. We have students who go to the American School for the Deaf because of hearing impairment. We have students with multiple disabilities that we do not have the equipment for that need to go to out of district placements just because of the severeness of their disabilities. It depends. So that's in a nutshell. I think I covered most of them. If I didn't, I know you know where to find me. Sure. So we do have a line in our budget for tutoring. Usually tutoring is only for students who are not able medically to go to school. That's the majority of our tutoring line is what we call homebound tutoring. If a student, we sometimes have students that cannot be around other students because of medical issues, or they're recovering from a long stay in the hospital. So we do send some of our teachers to homes for in-home tutoring. There are some occasions where we are waiting for an out-of-district placement, and we may have a 2-week wait before a spot becomes available, and the least restrictive environment would be at home with a tutor. So that's where tutoring comes into play, mainly for students that are ill.
Thank you.
Jennifer Reynolds, 5 La Fantasy Road. First of all, kudos to all of you. Let's be honest, this is really difficult. No matter what you do, not everybody's going to be happy. So, I applaud you all for doing what you're doing. The education budget is going to take the largest amount of questions because, let's be honest, it's the biggest part of everything that we're looking at. And with that, I have a couple of questions I hope you can answer. In the presentation, you noted that there were 2 full-time para positions and 2 part-time that were going to go away, and they would equate to 1 full-time special education position. I'm trying to figure out how one person's going to see more students and help more students than 4 people did. So that's my first question. And my second one is, the budget mentions almost a $2 million increase in special education, and I know we're talking a lot about special education. My question about that is it shows an increase of only 20 students. So I'm trying to figure out how that correlates. So if you could speak to that too, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. The first one, 4 people versus 1. So the part-time paraeducators are positions that we can never fill. So they are just kind of money placeholders, if you will. So we're just cleaning that up. They're very hard to fill, those positions. And we require, because of the number of students that we have that require special education services, we really need someone who is certified in special education. So we still have a lot of paras. We have, several paras in each of our building. If a student requires a para, we are mandated to provide that para. So, reducing a couple of the para-educators for certified staff lets us have someone who has greater expertise to kind of guide the paras or to instruct paras that we have on the ground already to work with the students that have IEPs. So we do need someone that has kind of more of an oversight that can manage some of those IEPs more effectively and efficiently. 20 students, it depends who those 20 students are. You could have 5 students, and all of those 5 students could move in tomorrow, and they could all be already out of district placed from their sending town. That could happen, and it has happened. You can blink, and you can have a family move in with 2 students who are out of district place. We have to honor that. We have to honor that. It's not like, well, we don't have the money. That's not how it works. Legally, we have to honor that. So 20 students, 5 students, 10 students, 100 students, it depends on the level of need that is associated with the cost of those students. Yep.
Thank you.
Of course.
Good evening, Ian McDonald, 548 Valley Road. Just a question following up on that, out of curiosity. With the 100 students, or what's that comparison to historic? I mean, do we have a historical average for like what that number of students are that we're kind of? Yeah.
It's far greater than anything we have experienced in the past. I think what I provided was about a 5-year look back. Mm-hmm. I mean, keep going back, the numbers keep going down. It's only gone up. So that's the trend. Certainly, you can go onto Ed's site and you can find all the data I shared today is on the public Ed site.
Okay, and why do we think it's going up, or do we know, just to get a handle on that?
Well, that is a question that I don't know applies to the budget, but there's a lot more awareness around special education. Mm-hmm. Parents are much more educated. Parents seek out independent evaluations. That doesn't mean that we have to accept those.
Yep.
But I think there's just a lot more education and knowledge around special education and the needs of students. That would be my theory.
Okay.
Anyone can debate me on that one, but that's my theory.
But it's not just an exceptional thing this year. It's more of a trend than it is a exceptional
Absolutely.
thing. Okay.
And if you look at that slide that I shared, you're going to see the state average or the state increase of special education. That's that special education major cost driver number 2. And you can see our bar graph mirrors it almost exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to that point, I will say that, I think the point about the pullback in the state funding, I know, we have to deal with it on our taxes in Killingly, but this is really, talking to people from other towns, this is a statewide issue, and the state has sort of pulled back on a lot of this municipal funding, and it looks good sometimes on their budget, but then we wind up picking it up on our end, which is unfortunate. And I don't think I've been, very pleased with the administration, and my older son's in KIS now, but all three schools I think has been excellent. I don't think it's been in any ways sort of excessive anything compared to when I was in school. I think that's not really what we're seeing here. I think the big picture is a lot of that pullback in the state funding. And, that said, I do kind of wonder, I know, Access Road was not something anybody was going and begging for. I don't know how much and I know there's sort of you're told we need to do that, but I do wonder, given maybe some of these rises, if this is the year we do that, or if we kind of lean on that non-lapsing account a little more for some of that special ed funding, maybe as one way to offset some of that. Does that need to happen this year, or is that just, I know it's been a long time coming, so I understand the impetus to we're supposed to do this, but,
Yeah, part of the agreement with the fire marshal so that we could indeed use our fields is that we complete this project within a 2-year timeframe.
Okay. And otherwise, they're going to Owen Bell, or is there any kind of, there's no arrangement at that point? Okay. And then, okay, thank you.
Sure.
I do, yeah, it's, I'll just, as on the town budget, I'd second Mr. Reynolds' thought that, I appreciate us trying to bring things up to standard, but that might be the place where we gotta tighten things a little bit on some of the paving budget. We want our roads to be safe, but maybe they're not certain things we could let go a little bit. And just lastly, on in terms of, well, maybe back with the Board of Ed, I think one thing that might be helpful, and I know you've done a lot of work, and I thought your presentation was very good. But with those questions of special ed staffing and really breaking that out, because I do think there's a question of when we talk about staffing increases and we're talking about special ed staffing, exactly where there's those potential cost savings are, and you're increasing the staffing budget, but it's potentially reducing those out of district placements, and I think that's an important conversation to really break out, and so really see a lot of the numbers on that. And I think you did a pretty good job with that, but I think we probably need to do a little more there. And also on VOAG staffing, if we have a wait list on VOAG, again, I know this thing can vary based on how many potential students we have in any given year, but if that's a revenue generator, we need to think about VOAG staffing potentially as a place where we can add a staff person. We're actually increasing revenue. Of course, there's fluctuations there, so I know it's difficult. And I would like to see, I don't know if VOAG is going to the Brooklyn Fair or the Woodstock Fair. I know this is off point, but that's a place where you got a lot of young people who are into agriculture. It's a great place to kind of boost that. And some of our other programs too are robotics, maybe some of our sports programs that are really successful, getting them out to some of these sending schools to help, increase some of this, I think would be helpful. And then just lastly as my second lastly, I apologize for that, probably over my 5 minutes. In terms of revenues, I know there's a talk about the negotiation around the transfer, the dump, and with the solar panels, and I very much support that. I think we should be putting those on there, but I do think that we should be, I know there's talks with Green Sky specifically, and maybe that's the best possible outcome, but that's a potential revenue generator for our town. I know other towns have power purchase agreements where they're able to buy some of that power at a much reduced cost, and there's other arrangements with some of these companies, or maybe with another company. And so I think we should keep our mind open in terms of, could we be generating a little more revenue on that. Maybe this is the best deal, but I think just even as from a negotiating standpoint, having some alternatives on the table, I think might be helpful. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Joseph Zornato, 32 Foster. I wanted to talk about special ed again. It just sounds like we're running at very tight tolerances and maybe not thinking ahead a couple of moves. What am I saying? I'm saying if it's at 100 students now, what do you do when it's 200? And then 300? It just doesn't seem sustainable. Not that these kids don't deserve all that they need, but how do we fund it? Because we're barely now making 100 work, and it's going to go up. And I think a lot of the reasons it's going to go up are because we're looking at the world today, and we're looking at the screen life, and we're looking at the alienation, and we're looking at the poor nutrition, and just on and on. And so when the number of students double or triple, which seems realistically possible in the fairly near future, have you gamed that out at all, I wonder? And what would we do?
It's not sustainable. So you're absolutely right. That is why there's been so much discussion at the state level. All of us, the superintendents in this area across the state, as well as Board of Education chairs, have submitted testimony and have testified at the state level to say exactly what you just said. It is not sustainable, 100%. There is no 5-year plan for any district because it is not sustainable, particularly when the excess cost reimbursement has never been fully funded. We need more money in that. We also need more money in our special education grants to sustain our staffing that we have now. So you're right, it's not sustainable.
Okay, so 2 pie-in-the-sky suggestions. One, for the access road, demand the fire department get smaller fire trucks for the access road. Instead of us getting a bigger road, they should get smaller trucks. I know, ridiculous. Right. And, oh, dang it. Is it realistic to sue the state for the money they promised? A class action suit of some kind? How? Because we can't keep paying for what they're not paying for. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to come up? Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to come up? Anyone else who spoke who'd like to speak again?
Sorry, just quickly, just to Mr. Zornato's point about the smaller things, I know we're supposed to get this done. I do know there's vehicles, both medical transport vehicles, and there's even some fire suppression vehicles that are pretty small and pretty cost effective. So, the district could, we're talking, tens of thousands instead of, so I don't know, maybe there's a stopgap, some sort of solution there. I know it's a long shot and this is supposed to get done, but there are small fire suppression vehicles and there are small vehicles with stretchers and whatnot. So I'll just throw that out there. Thanks.
Yes, so there are requirements for the road to be able to accommodate the largest fire truck that we have. That is from the fire marshal, so not my decision.
Anybody else like to come up and speak again?
Ida Barris, 1123 North Road. I think a huge part of our issue is that we don't have cost sharing with the state, where we're talking about this 100%, but it's also a lot of these other things. So maybe it's time to really think about those folks in government that might support just that. next time you vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to come up and speak? Are there any comments from the Board of Education members they'd like to make at this time? Are there any comments from the town councilors? Hula?
This question is for Dr. Nash. What is the difference between the 23-24 budget and the budget that was adopted for 24-25? The difference?
What is the difference, different fiscal years?
The increase. What was the increase between 23-24 and 24-25?
For 23-24?
The increase from 23-24 to 24-25.
I can look, hold on one second. I believe the increase in the 23-24 was,
To 24-25, that increase.
it would be a 3% increase? Or
Dollar
the-
amount, please?
I don't know what the dollar amount is. From 23-24 to 24-25, it was a little over 1% increase.
I need the dollar amount.
I don't have that on me. We're going 2-3 years back here, so I don't have that with me. I can certainly get it for you. I don't have that with me.
Okay, because from the adopted 24-25 budget, after the audit, there's going to be an $800,000 budget surplus that will be put into the non-lapsing fund. You said that.
Yep.
You
That
said
is
that the Board of Education budget was cut by what was actually presented. So there was plenty in the 24-25 budget because there's that $800,000 budget surplus that will now, after the audit, go into the non-lapsing fund. So what is the projected budget surplus for 25-26, not counting the unexpected overages from the special education budget?
The projection that was shared at the Board of Education meeting last night does not show a surplus. It shows a $650,000 deficit.
Not including the the special education overages, the surplus from other line items?
That is at the end of all of our budget lines, including the deficit and any lines that do have surplus. There is still a $650,000 deficit.
Okay, so that's not answering my question. What is the surplus from the budget line items besides the special education budget deficit?
All right, so if you want to look at it this way, we have about 1.7 million in special education. That's a deficit. And so applying the overages or the surplus, if you will, we're bringing that 1.7 down to 650,000.
Okay, so if there wasn't the unexpected overages in the special education, which was unexpected and should actually come from the non-lapsing fund, there would have been an approximate 1.1 million budget surplus if there wasn't the unexpected special education overages.
We could have had that if there were no special education costs.
Thank
We
you.
also have done things such as a budget freeze. We've not filled positions just because we do currently have such a large deficit. So we have done some strategies this year so that we do not have such a large deficit.
Thank you.
Dr. Nash, so is there any, with the Therapeutic Academy, is there any way that we, our local legislators can help us in Hartford? If we're doing this or we're making this investment, is there any traction on, us getting any funding from the state? Since we're trying to alleviate this, Mr. Zarnato spoke of, it being unsustainable, the number, and I understand your hands are tied on these, that, there's, you have to follow the law. But is there any traction of how many other towns are doing this, are being proactive like this, and are we just getting overlooked, being one of the areas in the state that's trying to do the right thing?
I think there are some schools that have done something similar. Locally, I believe Woodstock Academy has a similar program. I can't think of any other schools in the area that have. Thompson Public Schools has an academy inside, but it's not attached. They're just renting their space, similar to what we had with EastCon for several years. So we're probably the only one in this area that I can think of that is doing that. I wish there was more funding for districts that were trying to be forward-thinking, but there is not. There is a special education expansion grant, which is SEED. It's for $154,000, which could support a teacher at that, maybe a paraeducator and a teacher. The unfortunate part of that grant is the way that it was written. You cannot use it for any third-party vendor, so you cannot use it for any therapeutic third-party vendor. So if you were bringing in clinicians for your academy, as we do, specialized clinicians, you cannot use it for that. So it was a nice gesture, but unfortunately some of the red tape behind it has our hands tied in how we can use that funding.
Any other questions from town councilors? Okay. I have received a few written comments that were sent to our budget comment email. I'm not going to read them all. There were 9 comments from individuals in favor of the town funding the request from the Quinebaug Valley Senior Center. There were 5 emails from people supporting the Board of Education budget, and there was 1 email supporting funding for the library budget. These comments have been distributed to the town councilors. I add them to the budget page of our website if anybody wants to go look at who commented and precisely what they said. And from this evening, the town council will proceed to deliberate the budget at their meetings next week. We have a meeting on Monday, we have a meeting on Wednesday, and a meeting on Thursday to go through deliberations. We'll at least meet on the Monday meeting and see how far we get, and if we need to, we'll do the same at the Wednesday and Thursday meetings. You can still submit public comments relative to the budget to the town council up until the time that they take a final vote to set the budget for town meeting. You can also attend in person. The council meetings, each of those nights I mentioned, will be at 7 p.m. So the council has to deliberate to cut the budget to at least the number I mentioned in the municipal spending cap of 2.64% or lower. And once they've done that and they vote on it, we will publish a notice for town meeting, which will include the legal notice with the numbers, and we'll also have an updated presentation we'll distribute on the website with the revised budgets, the tax rate impacts, and so on. The annual town meeting is May 4th, 7 p.m. in the same room. It'll be a similar format. And that's it. Thank you all for coming. See you in a couple weeks.